Hi, it's Nicole. Hedda Gabler. Hedda Gabler is a name to remember. She reminds me of Anna Karenina, a tortured soul in a complicated woman. In my mid-year review and planning video, I mentioned that I'd like to explore world classics in the form of drama. I've since read, listened to, and watched the play Hedda Gabler by 19th century Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen. Ibsen is one of the founders of modernism in theatre, often referred to as the father of realism. Works of realism mostly are about familiar things, everyday activities and experiences. For example, Middlemarch by George Eliot and Madame Bovary by Flaubert are realist novels. Chekhov's plays are works of realism too. The play Hedda Gabler was gripping and powerful. While I was in the middle of it, it was thought-provoking long after it ended. There's not the usual language barrier of a Shakespeare play, so it's really easy to follow. There's just the right number of cast, not so big it gets tangled and complicated, not so small that it's boring. The story is simple and focused, rich with meaning because Hedda is a complicated, interesting person. Not very likable or commendable, but relatable. I listened to the BBC radio drama version produced in 1998 featuring Harriet Water as Hedda and watched the National Theatre stage production from 2016 featuring Ruth Wilson as Hedda. For this video, I'm using the Henry Cooper translation and adaptation, which is what the BBC radio drama version uses. Both the BBC radio drama and National Theatre versions are wonderful. I thought I would obviously have loved the recent, more visual theatre production better. I do love it very much, but not more than the radio production. The recent theatre production is like a digital photo in high definition. Each pixel is pin sharp and richly saturated, and the older radio production is a black and white photo print from the past, grainy and textured. Both beautiful in their own way. I can't decide which I prefer, so I'd like both, please. So what is the story about, Nicole? It's about a woman who's dissatisfied with her life, takes hold of an opportunity to achieve something, but ends with a fatal consequence. It's so wonderful. I don't want to spoil it, but you probably can tell it doesn't end well. The ending and the scenes leading up to it are so powerful. I don't want to avoid talking about them. It's such a dilemma. I want you to enjoy it yourself as a blank canvas, as I did, but I also can't help talking about how amazing it is. So I will talk on and let you decide what to do. Like Shakespeare, and now I believe all good shows often do, we start with two minor characters talking about Hedda. This seems to be the thing to do if I ever write a play. I'll give the audience the first impression of the protagonist from a third party too. From them, we hear that Hedda is demanding. Arriving home at midnight after the honeymoon. Clue, she just got married. Arriving home at midnight after the honeymoon, she asked the maid to unpack everything immediately. Hedda's lifestyle is extravagant. The maid, Bertha, complained, "You can't imagine how much there was to unpack." Hedda's difficult. Bertha adored her young master, Jürgen, and nursed him since he was a boy, but she didn't like Hedda because she was so very particular with her ways. Hedda's inconsiderate and selfish. She wouldn't drive Aunt Julia home at midnight because the carriage was filled with her luggage. But the good old Aunt Julia made excuses for her. Hedda was a generous daughter, implying that she was used to the extravagant lifestyle, riding a horse dressed in satin and wearing feathers in her hat. She was used to being spoiled and having her every wish and whim satisfied. And reading between the lines, She married beneath her. Aunt Julia and the maid sounded like they still couldn't believe, quote, the most beautiful, the most sought after Hedda married their little boy Jorgen, even though he was now Dr. Tesman and almost a professor. We learned what a saint Aunt Julia is. She mortgaged her meager annuity as security to furnish their house, with great pleasure as well, because Tesman didn't have a job or salary yet. She said, "We would be only too happy to help. What else have I got to live for but to contribute a little to your happiness?" Aunt Julia splashed out on a bonnet, so Hedda would not be ashamed of her if they happened to go out together. Aunt Julia didn't believe the high and mighty Hedda would go out with her at all, but she hoped maybe one day they would, because she was part of the family now. But when Hedda appeared, Aunt Julia visited too early, she didn't sleep well, she didn't seem to be happy about the house, the light from the open window was too harsh. And this is the last straw. She exclaimed, "We shall never get on with this servant, Tesman. Look there, she has left her old bonnet lying about on the chair. Just fancy if anyone should come in and see it." That was Aunt Julia's new hat that she just bought for her sake. Hedda humiliated such a dear old soul who had done so much and loved so much. I think the key words of the play are beauty and power, and the question the play asks is what gives meaning to one's life. We'll soon see there are three men in Hedda's life. They try to wield power over each other, and their plotline occupies most of the play. But Hedda's life is held up in comparison to Aunt Julia in terms of beauty. The word comes up repeatedly. It's especially striking at the end of Act 3 and the beginning of Act 4, when beauty is to do with death. We'll see that a bit more later. Hedda and Aunt Julia appear on stage together as bookends of the play. Aunt Julia is beautiful and at peace. Hedda is not. Right, that's too much about the first few scenes. I just love how much the author manages to show in such a short space of time with very little happening. I'll continue with viewer details. Here are the three men in Hedda's life. Her devoted husband Tesman, a humble, honest scholar, married the love of his life, adores Hedda, but Hedda married him because she's getting old and it's time to settle down. "I have danced myself tired. My time was up. Jürgen Tesman isn't such a bad match, is he? He's respectable and people take him seriously, don't they? And he's conscientious. He works hard. I see no reason why he shouldn't do well. Do you?" Do you notice that all the statements are followed immediately by a question? Is he a bad match? Don't they take him seriously? Do you think he'll do well? She has no idea, and she cares more about what others think of him than what he's really like. Tesman is respectable. He works hard, so why not Tesman? He could be anyone who's socially acceptable. I think the way Tesman, contributes to the tragedy is that on the surface, he can't provide the lifestyle she expects. But on a deeper level, as Hedda's husband, he has too simple and innocent an inner life. From the beginning to the end, he is clueless as to what's going on in Hedda's life and heart and mind. Not saying it's right or wrong, just stating a fact. That's who he is. He doesn't see that Hedda doesn't return his affection, or that Hedda is bored to death with his books and research and his endless talk on the history of civilization during their honeymoon. He doesn't see the coldness and wickedness in her, but he also doesn't see that Hedda struggles and suffers desperately. You can't say he's a selfish person. He's warm to his aunts and he worships Hedda. Maybe he's wishfully blind, knowing subconsciously that if he looks into his wife's soul, he'll see an abyss and he'll not be able to deal with it. That's why he gravitates towards the sweet little Thea. I think it's a mistake that he married her in the first place. Judge Brack, the sophisticated, expensive bachelor, he is a useful good friend to Jürgen and Hedda, who's powerful in society and is well connected. When Hedda won't drive Aunt Julia home, we hear that Judge Brack did. When it was terribly expensive to secure the house for the couple, Judge Brack arranged it. It's not because he's kind, but because he wants people to be indebted to him. He knows things and manipulates people with his knowledge, subtly. The actor who plays the role in the National Theatre production wears a crisp, spotless white shirt. Even when the scene gets messy, he stays clean and sharp. He's been an old friend of Hedda's and offers to entertain her with the kind of entertainment that her old familiar circle used to provide, since now she's poor and has no social life. Again, not because he's kind and wants to be a good friend, it's because he wants to wield power over her. The most beautiful and most sought after woman in society, he can't have her in the conventional way, so he will find another way. Beauty and goodness are the key words. When you compare Hedda and Aunt Julia, power is the key word when you put Hedda and Judge Brack next to each other. But she doesn't see him that way. He's just another harmless man hanging around in her life who makes it a tiny bit more interesting. They talk like equals and friends. She doesn't hide her bitterness, desires, dissatisfaction and disappointment, her fallenness from him. She's more honest and open with him than with Tesman. Here's one example of Hedda's interaction with Judge Brack, which is very different from her interaction with Tesman. When Brack comes in by the back door at the beginning of Act 2, Hedda is playing with her pistols. She actually fires at him and says, "Did I hit you?" with a nervous giggle before she asks him to come in. The madness shows in her voice. Harriet Water has an amazing voice that suits the character so perfectly. She's hysterical and a bit dangerous and deranged. She holds it in and tries to be good and normal when she's with Tesman. She lets it out unfiltered when she's with Brack. His life is not black and white, it's grey, leaning towards black, and Hedda is of the same colour in their shared shadiness. So between Tesman and Brack, her options are rather sad: to fall free in sin or be chained in goodness. The sin is hidden, the goodness is on the surface, it's hypocritical, and she's deeply unhappy. Then there's the genius, vulnerable, and desperate Isla Lovebog. The voice actor only says her name in a breathless, quivering whisper, and I know he's fallen for her long ago and has never managed to forget her. And now he finally sees her again, not only married, but married to Jürgen Tesman. How could you throw yourself away like this? The compressed, tortured emotion is going to explode any moment. When they knew each other before, she was so young she didn't even know if it was love. They had been innocent kindred spirits. They bared their souls and just talked. But he had ruined their friendship with his passion and gone on, this is implicit, to ruin his reputation in society by becoming an alcoholic. He has now come clean with the help of Thea, an old school friend of Hedda's, and now comes back to re-establish himself in the academic world with his genius ideas and his writing. Isla Lovebug said, you had such power over me. To Hedda. I find the pursuit of power a compelling theme. Hedda craves power, the strength and courage to do something. She was shocked when she heard that Thea left her husband so openly. She exclaimed admiringly, "How brave!" The stupid little thing, an insignificant woman whom she despised in school, had done a brave thing that Hedda would never have done herself. Then Hedda found out Thea also had power over Lovborg. She reformed him. They inspired each other and they worked together as equals. Hedda's jealous of her because Thea has the courage to escape her own misery and she has power to change other people. She's powerless in both and she wants that power too. It's such a delicious thing, but the consequences can be so terrible. In a fit of jealous recklessness, Hedda pressured Eilert Lovborg into drinking and sent him to a wild party, believing he would thrive and conquer. This is a telling dialogue where the two themes are woven together. Oh, Hedda, what will happen? At 10 o'clock, he will come back, glowing and triumphant, with vine leaves in his hair. Oh, I hope so. And he will have conquered. He will have conquered himself, and he will be a free man for the rest of his life. Oh God, if he would only come back as he is, never mind triumphant. He will come back triumphant and no less. You may doubt him, but I believe in him. What do you really want, Hedda? The power to shape a human destiny. Haven't you got that already? I haven't and never have had it. What about your husband's? Do you think his destiny is worth shaping? You don't know how poor I am, and you are so rich. I think I have to burn your hair off after all. Let me go, Hedda. Supper is served. Thank you, Bertha. We're just coming. No, thank you. I would rather go home now alone. Don't be ridiculous. First, you must have some supper, you stupid little fool. And then, at 10 o'clock, Eilert Lovborg will be here with vine leaves in his hair. It's absolutely crushing when she says, "Do you think his destiny is worth shaping?" She values her husband so little in her heart, while on the surface level, her entire existence depends on the stability of the marriage. She thinks herself poor and Thea rich. Is definitely not on the financial terms or the social terms. Thea had just given up everything and escaped from her loveless marriage. She means rich in meaning, power and courage. Thea cares about Lovborg and their work together. It gives her life meaning. But Hedda's life is empty. She doesn't care for anything. She's afraid of pursuing what she really wants. She's a coward. She knows, because she keeps saying it herself. Therefore, she's bored and she's poor. She's so jealous, her savage, deranged dark side seeps out, like when she shot back. The vine leaves remind me of Bacchus immediately. I don't know my classical stuff very well, but I think I met him in Metamorphosis as the god of wine, feast and bliss. He often has vine leaves in his hair. When Hedda says dreamily that Lovborg will come back with vine leaves in his hair, she's creating a dream to hold on to. She hopes this act of courage, if you can call it courage, it's more recklessness. She hopes you will change him and create something beautiful. The pursuit of beauty is another theme that stands out to me. On the contrary, Eilert Lovborg doesn't come back as she imagines. Thea's power over Eilert Lovborg changes him for the better. Hedda's power over him and her pursuit of beauty are disastrous. When Lovborg comes back, there are no vine leaves. Instead, the situation turns ugly and desperate. Hedda's first dream of beauty breaks, and her solution to create a second dream of beauty in the way of destroying this ugly thing beautifully. That's her second attempt to wield her power to pursue beauty. Not just beautiful, but something bordering on sublime. Sublime, as I understand it, is a beauty that inspires awe and shakes the soul. In the literary world, it usually takes a death and a tragedy to achieve that effect. Hedda plans to sacrifice a life in order to achieve her goal of beauty and sublimity. At the end of Act 3, she gives Lovborg one of her pistols as a parting gift and says, "Do it beautifully. Do it beautifully." Again and again, like she's in a trance, like she is casting a spell. Aunt Julia follows immediately at the beginning of Act 4 to say her poor sister has finally died. Aunt Julia's love and labour have given a sick old woman dignity in life and death. She died peacefully and beautifully. I must wash my beloved sister, dress her and lay her out as well as I can. I'd like her to go to her grave beautifully. Just compare that with what Hedda just did. When the inevitable news comes, she is not affected by the death of Lovborg. She knows it's coming. She's almost triumphant in her knowledge. She is disappointed that it's not done as beautifully as she expects. He was found with a bullet through the breast. Through the breast? Yes. Not the temple? Through the breast. Ha, the breast. Yes, that's good too. Yeah, it's acceptable. She has achieved something. Lovborg's suicide had somehow liberated me. It gives me a sense of freedom to know that an act of such courage is still possible in this world, an act of such beauty. Eilert Lovborg did not live a small and narrow life, obeying petty man-made laws and rules. No, he had the courage to live life according to his own principles. And it culminated in this last and greatest act of defiance, an act of sublime beauty. To want and to dare to turn his back on this world in the prime of his life. Like Thea running away from her husband, this is something that Hedda cannot do, but she does it through Lovborg. She finds meaning in it. However, Hedda learns very soon what really happened, and her dream of beauty is dashed again. It's like a curse. Everything I touch becomes ludicrous and ugly. It's ironic at the very end. The danger of losing her marriage and her freedom is the last straw. When she comes to regret it and sees how much it matters and how much she has taken it for granted, it's too late. She wasn't really poor until then, but now she is. She's not a likable woman at all, but I understand her struggles and desperation. I feel for her. In the theatre production, the maid plays a curious role that's almost like Hedda's double and shadow. She sits at the edge of the stage throughout and watches Hedda silently. It's like she watches her burn like a shooting star, and she burns so bright. When Hedda finally falls silent, the maid bends down with a deep sigh. The star has finally burnt itself out and the show ends. She has finally achieved in her death the sublime beauty that she so craved. At the beginning I said Hedda reminded me of Anna Karenina because of their struggles as women as well as their tragic ending. But I find Hedda Gabler a more forceful work. It's more intense because the whole story happens within 2 hours instead of over 600 pages. Hedda pursues power, beauty and sublimity in a sickly way, but as a work of art, her tragedy is sublime. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.